This podcast is sponsored by Tusk, a continuity of business solution for industries that struggle with traditional banking. Check them out on the web at tusk.network. The Rob McNealy program is the nexus of cryptocurrency, blockchain technology, and entrepreneurship. Now, welcome to the program. Today, I am talking to Owen York. He is the founder of the Gun Industry Marketplace, which is one of the fastest growing marketing resource companies out there available to the firearms industry. So I'd like you to welcome you to the show. How are you today?
Hey, Rob. I'm good. How are you?
Good. So where are you calling from today?
Nashville.
Nashville. You don't sound like you're from Nashville. Where are you from originally?
Yeah, I'm another immigrant. I'm from Chicago originally, Chicagoland.
Chicago. So how'd you end up down in Nashville?
Well, long story, but I've always been coming to Tennessee. My mom's side of the family has roots here. I had friends who moved here back when I was still in high school, and so I kind of always liked the state. And then, me and the family relocated here in 2012.
That's very cool. It's actually kind of a weird trivia is that most of my family, my distant family, all came from Jellicoe, Tennessee. So my grandfather and all his family is all from a little town in northeast Tennessee, right off I-75. So I am very much a Tennessean and a Missourian via the distant relative. So tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get involved with the gun industry? How did you get involved with marketing? Tell me, where did you come from? How did you get here?
Yeah, I guess, and the marketing, I sort of rope it into, I've been doing like marketing and sales and business development, my entire, what I consider one life, which is my, professional or corporate career. So I've always kind of done all those things together. And so that kind of grew. And then I think the evolution into the firearms industry came in my 20s. In one of my earlier careers, I was doing a lot in public safety and starting to work with, defense companies. And so I, kind of got familiar with that territory. And then you can kind of see how that would lead to this somewhat already. But then it was sort of completed when I just kind of got into firearms as a hobbyist, really. I just thought it was a good idea. And then, you buy one, you buy another, start getting into it. And all of a sudden, you know how it goes. You have a collection. And then, I started, originally I started a pilot project, which kind of did pretty well. And it was enough that I went more and more into the firearms industry. And it kind of grew into what we have today. That's minus a lot of the details, but it was a long evolution to kind of end up here to where now I'd say we've been in the industry for a little over 5 years now, actually.
Well, I always like to know where people come from. As an entrepreneur myself, it's interesting to see how people just end up where they end up. And it's a lot of times you find it's not ever a direct path. And most entrepreneurs I know don't actually figure they'll end up where they end up. It's just like a kind of, opportunities come along and you take them. And I think it's really interesting to hear people's stories. But another thing is you're not just a marketer. I was looking over your bio and stuff, and you actually have some skills and talents. Tell me about those.
Yeah, well, I kind of grew up in the arts. Is that what you're referring to? My whole other life? Yeah. So, my whole life I've been, when I was a kid, I used to win Young Authors Awards as a writer, and that's what I first wanted to do. And I was writing and painting and drawing, and I always have been. And after high school, I went up to art school and got degreed from the American Academy of Art in Chicago, which is one of the top art schools there. And so I have a whole life in the fine arts. In my 20s, I was an actor. I did some voice stuff. I did a camera, TV, film, radio, commercials. I played piano for 8 years. I played saxophone for 4 or 5 years. So yeah, I've kind of traversed a lot of the arts in a whole other life, so, and I kind of run the two concurrently. So to this day, I run the gun industry marketplace and I run my art studio alongside of it. And it's funny, they seem to be maybe starting to dovetail a little bit, actually.
Well, on its face value, or if you listen to people on the left side of the political spectrum, people that are into guns are just uncreative, oafs, they're brutes, they're just knucklehead rednecks. What you don't tend to associate is fine art. You don't tend to associate people that are creative. And,
right.
Once I started really morphing my hobby of guns into, the projects that we're working with, I didn't realize how many truly talented artists are really in this space, but it's just a different genre.
Right.
I mean, you could even just look, the photography is so amazing in the gun industry. I mean, you wouldn't think about it, but it's like, we call it Gunstagram, Instagram. The gun porn thing is a real thing. And you're seeing just really amazing photography driving gun marketing through social media now. And
right.
A couple of years ago, if you would have said that, especially to people that are outside the industry, they would laugh at that. But it really is seeming that whole creative thing is coming to this space. And I think it's fascinating to me.
Even just since we've been in the industry, the whole, the amount of, I think, diverse people that are entering into firearms for work, for just, protection, interest, hobby, sporting, whatever. I know just since, our tenure in this industry, women has grown huge, just as kind of like a market segment. But yeah, I mean, it's, and of course the people are going to have such diverse backgrounds, whatever reason somebody buys a firearm or gets into the industry or whatever, probably, I want to, defend my family or, whatever the reason is. I mean, it's a million different people doing a million different things. So, it's quite different than maybe what the media may paint as, an industry full of hillbillies or something like that, which is completely the opposite. It's not true at all. I mean, it's people like you and me, Joe Schmo, average guy, dad, wife. I mean, so yeah. And I've met a ton of people who are, a lot when I'm dealing with other business owners, I find a lot more than I thought, actually, that there's a lot like me out there where they have their own artistic endeavors. Maybe, I found other artists, I found photographers, people who are actors on the side, but then their sort of day job is also in the firearms industry. So I think there's a lot more out there even than I thought originally. I thought I was sort of a anomaly, where.
Yeah, it's interesting because I do metal art as a hobby, metal sculptures, and I like to make things out of metal. I weld, and then it's kind of funny you say that because on Wednesday nights I generally go to my acting class, so it's same deal. It's like, to me it's just a different business, and I think that creativity, this is what I think. I think fine arts people are really creative, and I think good problem solving requires creativity. And to me,
totally. Totally. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's like, even in engineering, engineers are very linear, but you need creatives not only for the design, for the art part, like the aesthetics piece, but people that are creative can think outside the box that maybe linear artist folks can't, or I'm sorry, linear engineer folks can't. And I think having a diverse team where you have those creatives is pretty important out there. And it's just interesting when you talk to the people in the media and everything else. There's a lot of really, really creative people out there that are in this space. And I think guns are, if you, and I think I appreciate firearms, just from the mechanical and the artistic standpoint. I mean, some of these guns out there are both engineering marvels, and some of them are just straight up works of art. I mean, some of the stuff you see out there, especially some of the higher end firearms, I mean, they are beautiful. The machining, the finishing, the things like that. And I think creatives can appreciate that once they get around it.
Well, yeah, I agree. I mean, I have kind of the opinion of like the creative facilities that people have. I mean, I don't care if someone was an actor or an artist or an engineer or a business owner, or even like a mom, running her family. There's a creative capacity to all that. You still have, like you said, you still have to problem solve. You still have to come up with solutions. Where, had I started doing engineering, 20 years ago, I'd probably be pretty damn good by now. Just like somebody who's like, oh, I could never paint that. Well, I tend to disagree. If they sat down and did something for 20 years, they'd be pretty good at it, and I feel like we all, to some degree, have this creative capacity, maybe some more than others, but I feel like it's just they're applying it to what they're doing and what they're interested in. Even in terms of, a marketing campaign that I'm, been working on or something. I mean, there's a strategy, and that strategy requires a creative capacity. So, maybe artists, the ones who kind of tend towards art, have possibly more creative capacity, or maybe it's just more experience in that creative capacity. But, I don't care if your creative capacity is the administrator of a company of 500 people and that's your piece of art, or a painting or a campaign. It's all that, for me, it's all that creative capacity of the person. It's just what they're interested in.
And that gets us to gun industry marketplace, right? So what kind of things do you guys do? What do you do for the gun industry?
Yeah, well, I mean, at the base, usually what I kind of steer everybody towards when they're new is just kind of our membership. It's a membership organization. And basically what we are is people kind of come on board, and we're, part of their marketing and advertising arsenal, no pun intended. So we're not everything that they should be doing, but we're always pounding the pavement. We have some pretty specific niche markets that we work, and so somebody can come in here and list their products and their services, and we help to put them on the map, or continue to put them on the map, or reach more people who they aren't normally reaching. And so the idea behind it's pretty simple. We're just sort of like the website itself, I consider the hub. You need somewhere where everybody can go. And and it's kind of growing into more and more of a hub, maybe eventually the hub. And, everybody, when you go there and look, you find what you're looking for. And even the number of categories we have in there grows every week. So it's, so I'd say, at the end of the day, we're just, part of the marketing / advertising parts of these companies out there. And then over time, we've evolved some kind of more advanced services. Like, we got some ads, and we've got these kind of one-time campaigns we do called blasts that are very good. And, we launched a job board over the summer. We launched a new program for the local markets. So there's your FFL dealers, your gunsmiths, your gun ranges, things like that. So, the bigger we get, the more we're doing. And but at the bottom of it, if somebody goes, well, what do you guys do? Well, we help make, companies and their brands and their products and services known, which is really the name of the game, So that's at the bottom of everything. That's what we do.
So I would say, having been in this space for a little bit, that marketing seems to be a weak point for a lot of people in, mom and pop type shops. Some, you've seen this even in this space. It's like there are that redneck hillbilly kind of guys that don't get the internet. They still haven't figured out, they're not past Internet Explorer 6 or whatever but
right.
But I see that there are a lot more savvy people out there now getting into the gun marketing space, where they're now getting, yeah, we need to be online. Yeah, we need to be able to conduct online transactions. Yeah, we need to, up our game and actually just, do more creative kind of stuff. Have you found, you've been in marketing for a long time. Have you found that the gun industry is radically different than other markets, or is it just underserved as far as the creative marketing goes?
Well, it's changing, like you said. And again, I've only been directly in the industry for a little over 5 years now, but I've talked to enough people where, it's funny, I've actually pieced together a pretty detailed history of where things are, where they were, where they're going, all that kind of stuff. And I would say how I would probably describe it is especially when I first entered the industry, I found out real quick, this is an old industry. It operates old. And I knew then, within the first 6 months of working directly in the industry, I knew we were going to modernize the industry in some form or fashion. I didn't totally know how then. I just knew it was going to happen because early in my career, I've spent a lot of time with the technology, a lot of time in various technology industries. I'm pretty savvy with a lot of that stuff. So, with my experience and bringing it over to firearms industry, I thought, man, this is going to need a boost, And it reminds me a lot of the public safety market, where I would usually describe, those companies as like kind of an old boy network, very old school. It's kind of a big, small industry, and I found this industry to be very similar, which kind of made it hard to break into, on one hand. But then again, just even over the last 5 years, I think that's changing a lot where, there are a ton. Let me back up a little bit. When I say old, the industry itself was operating on the same supply chain it had operated on. I mean, you probably remember too. You'd look at websites of the, different distributors' websites, and they're, even in the 2010s, it looked like they were websites from 1998, which are, dinosaurs by now, very
Blinky,
old. Everything
blinky gifs. It's all done in front page.
Right. Yeah. It's just very outdated is really what it was. And now it's really starting to change, I think, especially because of a lot of the young generation, probably my age, a little older than me and younger than me, kind of coming in where they are tech savvy. They're tech savvy with developing their own sites. They're tech savvy with social media. So it's changing real fast, and you're starting to see those brands kind of come out of nowhere and kind of take market share. And, I think it's very much kind of a sink or swim in that right now. But yeah, I would kind of describe it as kind of an old industry that's changing very rapidly. I mean, all the lines are changing, and have changed.
Well, I think they're going to have to change. And I mean, you mentioned earlier that it's an old industry. And I mean, if you think about it, now I'm a Gen Xer, right? And that's the generation everybody's forgotten between the boomers and the millennials, because we were such a small generation. But the boomers were the biggest generation in history. And then they say the Gen Xers, my age, I'm in my mid 40s, were the smallest generation in history. But then, interestingly enough, the millennials are bigger than the boomer generation, size-wise, just population. So now you got these millennials coming in. Right now, boomers are retiring at a rate of about 10,000 people a day, from what I've read. And so, I think that dovetails back into what you said, is that it was an old, kind of literally an old, market. But what's happening is that you got the previously biggest generation in history retiring en masse, and now you got the biggest history in the biggest generation in history now coming on board. They're starting to find guns. They're starting to become adults. And those are the millennials. And, boomer, and it's funny because the boomers and millennials have all this weird hate relationship, but they forgot all about the, us Xers, and I'm fine with that. They can battle it out. But, but what I'm thinking is that there's so many millennials coming in now, and they're starting to, and this is what I'm seeing with millennials, and tell me if this dovetails with your experience, but the millennials did not get exposed to guns like us, at least me as an Xer did. But how I see a lot of millennials coming into the gun world are two ways. One, the war on terror. I mean, most millennials we've been in the Middle East for almost 20 years now. And so a lot of them are vets. And the other thing is video games. And, you know, it's amazing what I'm finding is that millennials are coming in because they've been playing these guns. They know the guns inside and out because the video games are so realistic with the guns. How to run them. And so these kids are coming to literally, I've seen this at gun ranges, never shooting a real gun before, but they absolutely know how to manipulate it properly. And it's like, it's pretty fascinating to me. What are you seeing as far as the millennials coming into this?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually did some research on the generations because the different terms and stuff like that. So I did a little research, and I remember years ago I wrote an article about it, and I'm 41. So I fall into a funny age bracket that they actually now coined an entire mini generation for us.
Zennials.
Exactly. Xennials, or Generation XY, and it's from this, different places say different dates, but it's like from about 1977 to 1983, and I was born in 78. So I'm like right in there. But when you read the description of it, well, I should say when I read the description of it, I'm like, yeah, that's me. I totally agree with that because on one hand, I grew up with, where I feel like I resonate with Generation X, or I can talk to the baby boomer generation with reality. Like I understand what they're saying, they understand what I'm saying. But then again, I grew up with technology. I grew up in the advent of it. In fact, in one of my earlier careers, I was helping the advent of parts of it, like some of the stuff I was assisting in this earlier career, some of it's still not released yet, or I saw it released 5 or 8 years later or something like that. And, so I grew up in the video gaming generation, but then again, when I was a kid, we shot 22 rifles in Boy Scouts,
Right.
We grew up shooting real guns. There wasn't the stigma, the fear, all the stuff that's being sown these days. And then again, on the other hand, of course, I played video games that had firearms in them, So yeah, I think that helps in terms of introducing the newer generation where they have a lot of maybe digital experience with them or reality with them. So I would say that's a big factor because even me, I didn't even own a firearm. I shot some here and there, but not like now, but I think I didn't even own my own first firearm until I was 30, maybe 31, and the first one I bought was just because I felt it was a good idea. So, I mean, hell, there might be a lot of them out there like me too, where, I grew up in Chicagoland, where even Chicagoland then though, didn't quite have the bad rap that it has now, with how liberal, how anti-gun, blah, blah, blah. I mean, every person in Chicago is not like that. But, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Generally, it's a pretty bad rap. But I don't remember that, when I grew up there. I don't remember that stigma. It wasn't such a thing then. You just, like I said, I shot 22s in Boy Scouts. It was no big deal, no big whoop. We all did. It was just a normal thing you did. So, and
it's interesting because my wife, I'm clearly Gen X. I was born in 72. My wife was born in 77. So she's a Zennial as well. And it's kind of interesting because, I would say that I'm a young thinking Gen Xer because, I grew up without technology. In fact, I didn't even have an email address till like my senior year of college. And then I didn't have my first cell phone until I was 28. And,
right.
And it's just kind of funny, but I've always been an early adopter of technology. So to me, mm-hmm. I've always felt very comfortable with technology. But I remember when I was growing up in Michigan, and back then you had to be, 21 like you do now to buy a handgun. But I remember when I was 21, so I had my first cell phone at 28, but I had my first legal handgun when I was 21. So right after, I remember on my 21st birthday, I went and bought my first handgun.
Right.
And so I grew up a little bit different because my parents were both from northern Michigan and rural locations. And so I had a kind of a different experience than maybe kids that only grew up in the suburbs, right? Because, I just kind of spent a lot of my time in, a rural location, though I was raised most of the time down in the city. So I think that changes things a little bit too. So if you grew up more rural versus more urban or suburban, I think that also changes your likely exposure to firearms. But the thing I think you tapped into is the stigma. Even when I was growing up, there really was not a stigma about guns. Even when I grew up in the suburbs, right? There just wasn't. People like, oh yeah, guns are cool. You know, it was like no one cared. And nowadays, I mean, it's interesting because I'm out there a lot. I network a lot. And with our projects, it's kind of in our crypto projects, kind of in the gun space. And I talk to people and I can see the look on their face when I'm in a networking event and I talk about my project and our focus of our project. And you can just see it in their face. They're like, oh, guns. You know, it's like, it's interesting. That didn't exist when I was growing up. And I would pull that blame squarely on the media and how they've been, you know, putting a lens on guns and gun owners and this demonization of gun owners for the last, I would say, solidly last 5 to 10 years. It's gotten really, really bad in this country, and it's unfortunate because, you know, we need to expose the millennials and get them excited about the firearms and the heritage around firearms and the, you know, the idea that self-defense is a positive thing. I don't understand how self-defense is considered a bad thing anywhere. I don't understand, but I'm running, you probably run into it too, but I'm running into people that think like, if you say you want to be able to defend yourself, you're like looked at like a lunatic. I mean, what do you see out there like that? Do you find that's pretty common down where you live, or is this a widespread view now? Or
yeah, well, I mean, I run into it too. I mean, also I'm in Tennessee, which is, you know, for the most part, pretty friendly. I think, you know, in Nashville where I am, it's a pretty metropolitan city, and then there's such an influx here over the last handful of years that it's funny. You almost don't even hear the Southern accent here anymore. It's a bunch of people like me from New York or Michigan or Illinois or California. Like the growth is just kind of crazy. So, I mean, there's mixed viewpoints moving in, but I think in general, you know, Tennessee's obviously very friendly to the Second Amendment and firearms. And, you know, whenever I hear about crimes or somebody breaking into a house here, I'm like, wow, you must have balls. I mean, get your head blown off coming into someone's house in this state, you know? But I think, you know, I kind of lost point of your question there, but
oh no,
you know,
it's just the, you know, the stigma thing that's new and how widespread.
Yeah, well, I get two stigma. So once in a while, I'll see somebody, and you know, I'm a pretty friendly guy. I talk to everybody. So you know, when I hear I work in firearms, it's like, oh, like once in a while, it's like, oh, you do, and it's a little odd. You know, where they might have bought into the, you know, the media is pushing and the, like you said, the demonization of firearms or the industry or whatever. But then again, the other side, and what I hear more of is it's more, you know, maybe it's my location, but I hear like, oh, you do? And they're super interested right away. It's a very sexy sounding industry to work in, you know? So I feel like I run into that more than I do the latter, but of course I run into the latter too. You know, with the crowds I'm running around in, I'm, you know, maybe not quite as often.
So the stigma, you know, has actually rolled over, and you've seen this a lot over the last, you know, especially last year and a half, where, you know, many different companies are now, you know, changing their terms of service, and they won't sell guns, or even online media platforms won't allow advertising for guns, for instance. So what have you found, you know, that stigma, you know, I think it does make it harder now for people that are in the gun industry, gun retailers, to kind of market their products. You know, they're outright banned from certain pay-per-click and normal advertising. And I think this goes back into, you know, what I think you're doing is really wonderful is, you know, can you talk or speak to a little bit about the difficulties you're seeing out there with people in the gun industry trying to face getting the word out and to market their business because of that anti-gun stigma out there?
Well, for sure. I mean, it's maybe not the sole reason why we're doing as well as we are and growing at the rate we're growing, but for sure it helps. I mean, you know, with the stigma, I mean, even if you look at the media, for example, and I don't want to say all media is bad, not all journalists are bad, but I mean, everybody who's probably listening to this knows what I'm talking about. I mean, even with the media, it's like marketing 101. You repeat yourself. You say that same message over and over and over and over again, even if it's false. You say it enough times, it becomes true, which is kind of a sad but true thing in the modern day media, which is a whole other topic. But in terms of that stigma being created, I mean, if anyone thinks anything less, that it's not an agenda, they're wrong. It wouldn't be here if there wasn't an agenda. Like, things don't just happen. It's being pushed. Someone's interested in this. They're creating, like, it takes people to create something, it's not like the laws of physics are creating the stigma, and what the way it's, this is one of the things we started to find out really quick, within our first 6 months of actually, physically working in the industry, was the shrinking online, being able to sell firearms, so it's affecting the online business, the e-commerce, the advertising, the marketing of it, the sales of it. And then you have the banks and banking institutions and payment processors walking away from it. And you could almost, and if you go high enough up the food chain, like the media companies, what do we have, like 3,000 media companies in this country, and they're owned by a handful of mega corporations. And same with the food industry. There's, thousands of food companies are owned really by a handful or two of mega corporations. In the banking industry, it's the same thing. Especially after the stock market crashed in 2008, the banking industry went from, I forget the exact number, but it was something like 20 or 25 major banks that owned all the, the majority of the sub banks, and it went down to like 5. So, you have these like mega corporations, these mega organizations who are controlling these arenas. And I know with like the payment processing, it starts to strangle out the firearms industry. And again, you could almost look at that and go, that seems like a plan to kind of push out hey, I can't sell firearms anymore in my shop or online, or, now I have, Amazon pushing out, all the scary black rifle parts. We were even doing some selling on Amazon and some earlier stuff, and there's we were gonna do accessories and gear, but even like bipods. I'm talking about like a foregrip with a bipod. You can't even sell that. It's a piece of plastic, but or single point slings, and these things got all removed off Amazon. And still, my favorite one just happened. I think it was 4 months ago. At the beginning of the summer, and a lot of people don't know this, but Amazon.com removed books on gunsmithing.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, like they removed books. I mean, we're not talking about secret plans to make the Death Star. We're talking about books on gun repair. So. I mean, when that stuff starts to happen. Yeah, of course it hurts. I mean, like Amazon is, very easily the number one e-commerce platform out there. And I know quite a few people who've made tons of money on there. And, but that, I was talking earlier last week, someone else about the free market. That's where it strangles out the industry in these different ways. But then different solutions start to crop up. People who are looking and paying attention, or maybe are in the right place at the right time, start to pick up this work that these other places are getting rid of or ditching. And so, and kind of a long-winded answer, but yeah, for sure. I mean, it's affecting online, the banking, the e-commerce sales, regular sales, the advertising, the marketing. So yeah, it's a thing.
Well, I'm glad there's folks out there like you that are coming up with a solution to that. And, we're working on that too with Tusk. And I think that we need to fight it. Unfortunately, we're at a disadvantage because, this is what I find though. again, if you would listen to the stereotypes of the mainstream media, the anti-gun media, it's all hillbillies and people that want to just go gun children and puppies down in alleys because they looked at them wrong, right? I mean, if you listen to some of these guys, it's insane. But
Right.
but the statistics back this up. But actually, gun owners are usually the most peaceful people and the most law-abiding. In fact, gun owners, this is a fact. This is statistically proven. Gun owners are more law-abiding than the average citizen is in this country.
Well, yeah. Well, look at it. Well, first of all, guns is not a cheap hobby. I mean, it's expensive to go buy ammo. It's firearms, it adds up, so typically the people who are really into it spend a lot of money. Those people probably work hard. They're probably pretty educated, and then the people who really get into it and, start actually reading their constitution, I mean, I agree. I feel like you are dealing with a different class that people don't really expect when you enter in this industry.
Exactly. Well, I do appreciate you coming on the show, and I do really respect everything you're doing, and you're doing a really great job out there. So, Owen, where can people find out more about you and gun industry marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest thing is just to go hop into the marketplace itself. It's just gunindustrymarketplace.com.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, sir. I appreciate all your time, and Godspeed to what you're doing.
Yeah, you too, Rob. Good chatting with you.
Thank you for listening to the Rob McNealy program. Make sure you check us out on the web at robmcnealy.com and subscribe to our podcast at YouTube, iTunes, and on the Google Play Store.
Quite a few people who've made tons of money on there. And, but that, I was talking earlier last week, someone else about the free market. That's where it strangles out the industry in these different ways, but then different solutions start to crop up. People who are looking and paying attention, or maybe are in the right place at the right time, start to pick up this work that these other places are getting rid of or ditching. And so, and kind of a long-winded answer, but yeah, for sure. I mean, it's affecting online, the banking, the e-commerce sales, regular sales, the advertising, the marketing. So yeah, it's a thing.
Well, I'm glad there's folks out there like you that are coming up with a solution to that. And, we're working on that too with Tuscan. And I think that we need to fight it. Unfortunately, we're at a disadvantage because, this is what I find though. Again, if you would listen to the stereotypes of the mainstream media, the anti-gun media, it's all hillbillies and people that want to just go gun children and puppies down in alleys because they looked at them wrong, right? I mean, if you listen to some of these guys, it's insane. But
right.
But the statistics back this up. But actually, gun owners are usually the most peaceful people and the most law-abiding. In fact, gun owners, this is a fact. This is statistically proven. Gun owners are more law-abiding than the average citizen is in this country.
Well, yeah. Well, look at it. Well, first of all, guns is not a cheap hobby. I mean, it's expensive to go buy ammo. It's, firearms, it adds up, so typically the people who are really into it spend a lot of money. Those people probably work hard. They're probably pretty educated, and then the people who really get into it and, start actually reading their constitution, I mean, I agree. I feel like you are dealing with a different class that people don't really expect when you enter in this industry.
Exactly. Well, I do appreciate you coming on the show, and I do really respect everything you're doing, and you're doing a really great job out there. So, Owen, where can people find out more about you and gun industry marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest thing is just to go hop into the marketplace itself. It's just gunindustrymarketplace.com.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, sir. I appreciate all your time, and Godspeed to what you're doing.
Yeah, you too, Rob. Good chatting with you.